Hi, welcome to Mind and Body Wellness, a television show where we talk about the health of your mind, body, and spirit. We interview a variety of guests from the mainstream to the alternative. I'm your host, Clovis Colley, and in the studio today I have with me Aaron Ruud from Christian Heritage. Hi, Aaron.
How you doing?
Good. Thanks for being on.
Good, you bet. Thank you.
Now, tell us your position at Christian Heritage and what Christian Heritage is.
Okay, well, I'm in on the leadership team as part of the development. So what that means is fundraising and just getting awareness out about our organization. Christian Heritage exists as primarily a foster care agency. That's what most people know us as. In fact, we're one of the top 2 or 3 foster care agencies in the state. And so we work with kids that are in a vulnerable position. And then we also have a program called Connect, where we're working with kids. Most of these kids have been languishing in foster care, and what I mean by that is they kind of get stuck in the system. And so for whatever reason, they might start bouncing from placement to placement, foster homes to group homes, maybe even to detention facilities, but they kind of lose connection with their family. So we work with them to kind of reconnect them with their family and build a lifetime network of support around them. And then hopefully out of that group of people, we find healthy family members that can provide permanency. And then we also have a program called Destination Dad, and we go into prisons and we teach fathers communication skills, parenting skills, healthy relationships, that kind of thing. And then as they go through these classes, they get extra privileges that are all geared toward reuniting them with their children and keeping them connected with their children.
That's really a cool deal. Mm-hmm. Now tell me, you said disconnected. What does that mean when you have a child that's languishing and disconnected from their family? Just that they haven't seen them for a long time? And how does that happen?
Yeah, so a good just an illustration of that is a child that we worked with, and fortunately he was just adopted recently. This child was removed from his home when he was basically an infant due to neglect. Parents, mom had some drug and alcohol addiction issues, and so he was removed and placed into foster care. After a short time, he was actually adopted into a family. And then I think it was about 5 years, he was in that family, and the mother of that, in that adoptive home, it was revealed that she had some pretty serious mental health issues. And so he was actually removed from that home, removed from adoption, and placed back into foster care. And so at that point...
The foster mother had serious mental issues?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't revealed until after he had been in their home for a while.
Okay.
No one really knew. So just the separation from his biological mom creates trauma. And then being in foster care, being adopted, and then being removed again, he just felt like nobody wanted him. And so his behaviors showed that, and he just wanted to. I think there was probably a lot of, hey, I'm going to test these next foster parents to see if they really want me. And he ended up kind of bouncing around from placement to placement to placement, group home, and I think he was. That's where he was. He was in a group home when we got his referral, and then we worked with him. We found that through his journey, he had actually worked with 89 professionals throughout his journey, which is a lot of people to be working on his case. When we got the referral, we reached out, as we always do. We do just kind of a blanket search. We get as much information as we can, and then we just we have a company that we work with. They send us names and phone numbers, and we start contacting people, and we start looking on Facebook, and we start finding healthy family members or supportive adults. Now, it could also be, a former foster family or someone that's been there for them. And so we did that, and we found an aunt and uncle really close they had been involved in his life up until the point where his adoption disrupted. And they didn't know what happened to him. So when we contacted them, they were elated. They wanted to do whatever they could to help him. They actually ended up taking him into their home as he was still a ward of the state and doing as a foster care type of situation. But then in April, they adopted him. And that's really the ultimate goal in our Connect program.
Sure. How long had contact been lost between the aunt and the uncle and the child?
I believe he was 15 when we got the referral, and I think his adoption had disrupted. I want to say it was about 5 to 7 years that they had lost
so that was
contact.
a lot of time, a lot of anguish for this kid.
Yep.
And a lot of hard times and a lot of hard feelings for him. But
Yeah.
How did he do once we got him back to the aunt and uncle?
Well, that's an amazing story, because I was able, as part of development and building awareness, we do some videos now and then, and we chose that family to interview. And so before he was adopted, I went out to their home, and I told the specialist if she could get me just kind of a description of him, what he's been through, and so when I read where he was at in his life, with being at a special school for behavior issues, the psychotropic medications that he was on you might be able to count on both hands and probably need a little more. I mean, it was a bad situation. ADHD, you name it. He was diagnosed with it. And so I was looking at this thinking, this kid, this is hopeless. And I go out and I go to their house where he was at his aunt and uncle's. And he greeted me at the front door, smiling from ear to ear, and just full of energy and just happy as can be. And I thought, what I just read is not who this kid is. And so I asked him during the interview, I said, so what's the difference between this and where he is at right now? And the uncle, who's just super loves him to death, but is very stern, and he's a wrestling coach. He has wrestlers in the family, and so they got that mindset. But he is exactly what this kid needs. Someone who loves him without a doubt, and he said he knows that we're not going anywhere, that we're here for him, and we're not letting him go. And so we actually went back and we got to film the adoption, and that was amazing. He's down to, I think, one of his medications. He's in a mainstream high school. In fact, he's the mascot for his high school. And so I believe that the unconditional love that this family has shown him has made all the difference.
That is a tremendous story. You don't get to hear things like that every day, but you're living it.
Yeah.
I am sure that you've had to go through things that were just the polar opposite of that didn't turn out well. Does that come up?
Fortunately, in this Connect program, we have been successful in every case that we've worked with children in finding at least what we call a lifetime network of support. And so as we reach out to these people that have been in their lives, or these family members, some of the family members don't even know they exist. But we are successful in bringing some of those people to the table, and they will commit to doing something. Maybe they'll commit to taking them out for dinner once a month. They'll commit to attending their athletic events. things like that. These are some, the kids, a lot of these kids that we work with are some of the hopeless, I mean, and I don't say that just to sensationalize it. I mean, it's truly, these kids are some of the hopeless that we have in our state. And to find this unconditional love is truly amazing. With foster care, 60 to 70% of the kids that come into our care through our into our foster families that we support, they go back home. They go back to their biological home. And so once they go back home, we really don't know in a lot of cases what happens unless they get referred back to us. So there are some, along with all the great things that are going on, there's a lot of heartache, and our staff, our team, absolutely amazing. I don't know how they do it. I'm absolutely humbled every day I walk in the door that I get to work with these people.
You have to be driven by some pretty good things, and you have a little bit of a different story about how you got here. Could you share that with us a little bit? You went from working at a body shop to doing maybe what you would call your life's purpose, or?
Yeah, so it's all part of my faith journey, and I managed a body shop in Lincoln. I was actually there from start to finish. I was there for 11 and a half years. But about the last 4 years of that, I really felt that God was calling me to do something different. And I was involved in men's ministry and some other things, and I thought, well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm just to be more involved and volunteer more. And so for 4 years, my prayer was that, God, you have to make this clear to me. You know, you're kind of stirring me up, so you got to make this clear. So some things that happened in my life that really showed the faithfulness of God to me. And I decided in November, about 4 years ago, that I was going to actually tell my wife, hey, I'm thinking about looking for another job. And I have no idea what that is. And that's a scary conversation to have. My wife said, the first thing she said is, well, just don't leave the one you've got until you find another one. And she was just so supportive. So I set out and I met with a couple people that I knew well, that knew me, and that I trusted, to say, hey, you kind of know me, you kind of know what my strengths are. Can you help me look? And this one particular lady that I met with, it was middle of December. So she calls me up about 2 weeks after we met, and she says, you know, I just had lunch with Greg Nicholas, the CEO of Christian Heritage, the founder. And that didn't mean anything to me. And she said, they're looking for someone, and you need to call him. It wasn't like, you might want to check this out, or, you know, this is a good guy to talk to. She said, he's expecting your call. And so I called him, I met with him, I found out about the organization, I found out about the position, and it really was the strengths that I have and the passions that I have. We're both networkers, so it was something I could do and keep networking and the marketing side of it. So they weren't actually going to even post the position until late spring. So I continued to meet with Greg a few times. I hadn't worked on my resume for years, so I worked on that just to get it ready. And when the time came, I applied, and there was no guarantees. And I had to continue at my job for 6 months while I was, like, all this excitement that was building. And so I started, and really I just saw, for me, I took a step of faith, and God really blessed that. I saw it in many different things. And so one of those things was Greg and Lisa Nicholas founded the organization in 1980. And the day I was offered the position, Greg Nicholas told me, he said, I have to tell you something before you accept this position that might affect your decision. I said, okay. And he said, Lisa's been diagnosed with cancer and multiple myeloma. And then that's a cancer that kind of builds up in the bone marrow. So he told me that they would be spending about 3 weeks out of every month for at least the next 6 months traveling to Mayo Clinic for a clinical trial. And it didn't really deter me. I came in, I learned what I needed to learn, and I was kind of thrown in the deep end, and I think that helped me. So we fast forward to March of the next year, where they start to, Greg is back more in the day-to-day operations. He's back in the office more often. Lisa, at this point, is still co-CEO, co-founder, but kind of given her space as to what she needs for her health issues. In May of that year, so we're almost a year from the time I started, Greg Nicholas, they lived out in Hickman on a gravel road just south of Lincoln. Mm-hmm. He was out walking his dog like he did many times along a gravel road, and a drunk driver came by and struck him, and he was killed right in the street, right in the road. His dog went back to the house. Lisa, after a while, was concerned about where he was, went out in the garage and saw the dog, and she was the one who found him in the road. And I'll tell you that I tell you that because that would be a lot for most organizations or companies to handle and still move on. But they built Christian Heritage on the foundation of Christ, and it was never about them. It was never about them. And today, there's a lot of things behind the scenes that took place that prepared us for that. Although it was tragic, and it really was devastating, we have continued, we are growing, and we're helping more kids and families than we ever have.
Well, I'm sure that's the way you would have wanted it, of course.
Absolutely.
How long has Christian Heritage Foundation been around? Or excuse me, not foundation, just Christian Heritage.
Yeah, so the Christian Heritage was started by Greg and Lisa in 1980 officially. So we started supporting foster families. In 81, they acquired a house, and they had a group home for boys in the Hickman area. A couple years later, they had a girls' group home. And so along with doing that group home work, then the foster care kind of started to build. And by that I mean, people doing foster care in their own homes in Lincoln, Omaha, wherever. And so we did that for many, many years. In the late 90s, we were asked by the Department of Health and Human Services if we would go out into the central service area. And so we acquired some land and built an office and a couple homes out in Kearney, just north of Kearney. And then in 2002, we opened an office here in the Omaha area, and we also found land at 148th and Old Cheney in the Lincoln area, where we now have our main office and 4 homes that were built as group homes. And so that's kind of where we're at. In about 2007, 2008, 2009, we decided not to do any group homes anymore. So that residential treatment, we changed those into foster homes. So we bring in families. It could be a couple, or it could be a couple with children, and we bring in the families that will do foster care in those homes. And they're bigger homes, so we can take we can take 4 siblings that come into care and not have to break them up.
And you talked a little bit about that, really trying to keep those kids together, which makes sense, I think, to anybody.
Right, right. It's hard to keep. It's not uncommon for we call it a sibling strip, but 3 kids to come out of, or 4 kids or 5 kids to come out at the same time, and so it's very hard to place that many children together. And so these homes allow us to do that. And in some cases, the homes are pretty close to each other, so we can even have a couple in one home and a couple in the other to keep them close.
That's good. I imagine being a foster kid has to be a very lonely proposition. And you were talking about that, the boy earlier, and just feeling like nobody wanted him. And I've dealt with some kids that have been adopted out and different things like that, and they do have this yearning. They don't know that these are kids that don't even know that they were adopted out, and they have this yearning or this. They do experience trauma, even though they don't know it.
Right, right.
Does keeping them together help heal some of that?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things I learned first when I started at Christian Heritage is that the bond between siblings, especially in these situations, can be, and in a lot of cases is stronger than the bond of the parent-child. So the parent, for whatever reason, either through abuse or neglect, mostly it's neglect, but in some cases it's abuse, whether physical or sexual abuse, there's already some tension there with the child and the parent. So these children, I was listening to a panel discussion, and they brought in 3 or 4 girls that had already aged out of the system. And one thing that I remember this one girl saying, she said, my parents, speaking of my biological parents, my parents will come and go. I may see them now and then, or I may never see them, but I always want to know where my siblings are. And so it's crucial. You think of some of these kids are going through, so they're going through this trauma of neglect or abuse, or watching abuse of a father and a mother, and that forms, going through that trauma, it's almost like you hear about the stories of these men that go to war.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of was soldiers.
Right, and they form this bond that nobody else can understand, and it's so tight. And so not only are they siblings, but now they've gone through this trauma together, and they're even closer. So, yeah.
These are some really amazing things that you're talking about. What do you see in the future here for Christian Heritage? Is this going to keep growing for you?
Well,
for us, for Nebraska?
As far as the foster care is concerned, we always, we talk about our organization being one of the largest, and it's a double-edged sword because we are passionate about helping these kids, but we'd rather not have to. We wish we didn't have to. And so there's been an overall trend over the past 5-6 years of the numbers of kids coming into the state as wards of the state or into foster care. That number has been shrinking. Just recently, there's been a pretty significant spike, and we're about 3,500 to 3,600 kids that are in foster care in the state right now.
And I think that I had heard you say that Nebraska is the second largest state in need.
Yeah, so
which just blew me away. I thought good old apple pie and conservative values, and that we would be of the lowest, but we're not.
It's the population of kids in foster care per capita, and we are consistently ranked in the top 1 or 2 by the Child Welfare League of America. And so the future, actually what we see is we really want the state to embrace what we call a diversion service, or going in before maybe a family has been put on the radar of HHS, where there's maybe some neglect. Maybe a child's coming to school with dirty clothes, or whatever the case may be, and a teacher reports that. And the caseworker can go in and they can say, you know, there's not a risk, they're not in danger, but we need to get them some help and some resources. And so we want to really help those families.
Stop it before something has to happen.
Right, and we call it a movement more than a program. We've become the lead agency for a movement called Safe Families for Children. And what that does, a really just broad explanation of it is we partner with churches. So I know we're with Coram Deo and Brookside here in Omaha and 3 churches in Lincoln. And we find 2 or 3 or 4 people that are really passionate about helping kids. And we give them the training and we let them take it. But what it is, essentially, is completely volunteer, short-term foster care. So an example, we have a woman she's really a girl, a teenager, late teenager, that has a baby and is living at the People City Mission in Lincoln. She is referred to us. We place her with a safe family. And again, it's kind of like foster care.
We're getting down to the end of our time here. I want to do a couple things very quickly.
Sure.
And I wish I could let you finish that story, but we're just running out of time.
No, that's fine.
How can people help you? How can people pitch in?
Well, really, I'm guessing that the audience that's seeing this, I would imagine that 95 to 98% of them have never heard of Christian Heritage. So awareness is a big thing. As far as the Safe Families for Children, we really want to work with more churches to implement that.
Tell us how we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, so my direct phone number is 402-890-8143.
On the web?
On the web, it's chne.org.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to Mind and Body Wellness. Thanks for being on, Aaron, and telling us about what's happening with Christian Heritage. Reach out to Aaron, reach out to Christian Heritage, help out. Thanks for watching the show, and we'll see you soon.